Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. My name is Vadim. Today, we're excited to welcome Clyde Mays. Everyone has an extensive lineup in front of them today. Thank you to Bill for setting this up. We're going to taste 8 different expressions of different bourbons, different ryes, and gosh, whatever else is in here. I'm not going to step on LC's toes and have him tell the story, but we're excited. Thank you for joining us. It's a brand that I don't know much about myself, so I'm looking forward to learning, as a lot of the members here are. And yeah, LC, you want to introduce yourself? Take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody for joining the call. I've been looking forward to this for a while now. And like it was mentioned a moment ago, we got a lot of great Clyde May products to taste tonight. My name is LC May. I am the Alabama State Manager and the National Brand Ambassador for Conecuh Brands, or more specifically, Clyde May's Whiskey. I'm also the grandson of the original maker, Clyde May. So I basically get to travel my home state of Alabama, and then from time to time get on an airplane and fly around the country and get to tell my grandfather's story and drink whiskey. So it's a pretty cool gig I have, and one I take a lot of pride in. So I'm very appreciative for all of you joining me. What I plan to do is give a little bit more backstory about how the brand got started, who Clyde May is. I promise I won't take an incredible amount of time or anything, because I definitely want to get to the tasting portion of everything. But I do think the more you know about Clyde May the man, the more you can appreciate the various whiskeys and bourbons that we have to offer here tonight. So I'll start by telling you that Clyde May, this brand originates in Southeast Alabama. I'm not entirely sure how familiar some of you are with the state, but it was in between a town called Union Springs and Troy, Alabama, in the southeastern part of the state. Not the closest big city would be the capital of Montgomery. That's where Clyde May was born and raised. He was born in 1922 to a single mother. Uh, Never knew his father, and unfortunately, his mother died when he was only 5 years old. So he was raised by his grandparents. And not long after they brought him in, the Great Depression hit, and they were already poor sharecroppers before the Depression. So you can imagine, I'm sure, the difficult life and childhood Clyde May had. And the only reason I'm always feel that's relevant to even talk about is, there's sort of two pathways you can take when you have a hard life. You can use it as an excuse to kind of go down the path to nowhere, or you can use it as an excuse to go down the path of success. And Clyde May was bound and determined, no matter what struggles he faced in his life, he was going to do whatever it took to provide a more comfortable life for his soon to be growing family. And before he, started his career and got to growing that family, it's always relevant to mention that he did serve with the U.S. Army in World War II, fought in the Southwest Pacific Theater. If anyone is familiar with the book or the movie Hacksaw Ridge, which is based on the life of Desmond Doss, Clyde May and Desmond Doss were in the same infantry together. That's more of a fun fact than it is anything else, but it's something that Clyde May definitely endured. So needless to say, he had a difficult front half of his life. He was injured in the war. He's a Purple Heart recipient, Bronze Star recipient. He had married my grandmother shortly before being sent overseas, came home and started raising a family. By the time it was all said and done, he and my grandmother had 8 children together. So a lot of mouths to feed in rural Southeast Alabama. My grandfather always had a full time job. He was in the timber industry for a while. He did quite a bit of cattle farming and things like that. But in addition to his full time job, in 1946, my grandfather started making moonshine whiskey. And I'm happy to say that Clyde May never sold a legal bottle in his entire life. From 1946 until he died in 1990, everything he did was illegal. The only time between 1946 and his death in 1990 that he wasn't making whiskey illegally is when he went to prison for 8 months for making whiskey illegally. So he had the rap sheet to prove it. Not only that, out of his 8 children, he had 4 sons and 4 daughters. All 4 of his sons have also been arrested at least one time in their life for making whiskey illegally, my father included. So I've been around whiskey making both legally and illegally my entire life. I'm happy to be able to break the family tradition of getting arrested and just do it by the book, even if we have to pay our taxes nowadays. But in the early 2000s, 2001, my uncle Kenny May, one of Clyde's sons, started the legal brand that we know today. For a very long time, the brand was very small, pretty much could only be found in certain parts of Alabama. Um, the brand is something that the family always hoped and wished would succeed, but there was a period of time there where we didn't really know what was going to happen with the brand. In 2004, it was named the official state spirit of Alabama. Alabama was the first state to designate an official state spirit, and it was Clyde May's whiskey. For a long time, it was the only state, but I do believe Virginia has since adopted an official state spirit as well. But for, like I said, for a long time, we were very small, but around 2011 or 2012, we really started to slowly but surely take off. And I'm happy to say that we're now available in all 50 states and also a handful of countries as well. So we've come a very long way since the early beginnings of a moonshiner, no question. And one question that I'll definitely go ahead and cover before we get to tasting, I know there's probably going to be a lot of questions about where the product's made and things like that. I'll cover mash bills and everything as we get to the individual product. But in 2001, when my uncle started this brand legally, it was still illegal to distill spirits in the state of Alabama. You couldn't make whiskey, vodka, rum, gin, anything. Uh, and I'm from Alabama, so I can say it. We're a step or two behind the times in most things, except maybe football or nowadays probably basketball. But it wasn't until 2014 that the state actually legalized distillation of spirits. So for the first 13 years of our legal existence, we could not legally make the product in our home state. So we've been making it outside of the state of Alabama since then. It's currently made at MGP, which I'm sure most, if not all of you, are familiar with. It's located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. They contract distill for us. I will say we have a very unique relationship with them because we were kind of got ahead of the bourbon boom. We were contract distilling back when that was a time when nobody was doing that. We were doing it because we didn't have a legal option. But I'm happy to say, and if I can, I'll share my screen real quick just to show you guys. I'm happy to report that we are now getting ready to open a brand new distillery in Troy, Alabama. And by the way, here's some pictures of Clyde May himself. That's him and his my grandmother. Top left, bottom left is he and one of his buddies from the army, and that's him on the right there. That's him and his 8 children. Him, my grandmother, and his 8 children. So obviously, a lot of mouths to feed. If anyone's wondering, yes, there's a pretty big age gap. My dad is the youngest, sitting in Clyde's lap there, and his older sister, which is standing up to the far right, she was 21 years older than him. So they were making babies for a while there. But going back to this, we're getting ready to open a $30 million distillery in Troy, Alabama. So we're very excited about this project. Here on this picture, you can see, it's going to be a bottling facility, distillery, museum, tasting room, bar, gift shop, just like something you'd see on the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky, except in Troy, Alabama. we hope to be open to the public around June. We will be open before then, but in terms of when the public can come visit and do those tours and everything, should be sometime in middle to late June, hopefully. We've had to battle a couple of hiccups here and there, but we're at the 2 yard line to use a football reference. But uh, I'm sure a lot of you can relate that it's sometimes a lot easier to go to the first 98 yards and a lot harder to do the last two. So with that, we can dive straight into the tasting. I'm happy to tell, little bit some fun facts and stories about the different ones that we will taste along the way. If you have any questions at any point in time, please feel free to ask me. Don't feel like I don't know if there's a certain process you usually do, but you're not going to hurt my feelings to interrupt me and ask a question or anything like that. So we will start. I know there's a lot to taste from, and if you don't mind, we're going to start on more of the whiskey bourbon side first, and then we're going to end with the rye whiskeys, if that's all right with everyone. But if it's not, hey,
No,
you
no, no.
drink.
We'll go with your. Can you tell us
So
just the way to line these up, please?
yeah, so I would start with the yellow label, the one that says Alabama style whiskey. That's 85 proof. I think we should do that one first, and then next I would say the 92 proof straight bourbon, which is that bottle on the far left of what you're seeing on your screen. After that, I would do the one that's labeled Conecuh Ridge straight bourbon. It's 5 years old, 100.6 proof. And then,
Hold on one sec. I didn't
yeah,
label it that because everybody has samples in front of them.
yeah, no problem.
Um,
Yeah. So what I'm
that
not
one
sure what
was
it
the you said 5-year-old.
5 year. It was the one called that we call Conecuh Ridge or CR
Um,
bourbon or something to that
it should be
effect.
around 100 proof, right?
100.6, but yes, if it says
Yeah,
100,
perfect.
that's correct.
So
Yep.
ours is going to be labeled 5-year bourbon 50.3.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So
It's the
that
one with the black ink.
correct. Yeah. So that would be number three. Number four would be the 5 year old single barrel. It's 102 proof. And then after that, you start getting into the rye whiskey. So the first rye whiskey would be the 94 proof. It's the one that's on your screen here, that half green label. And then I would do I'm sorry, backtrack. I forgot the special reserve. I forget. So back up from the rye for a second. The last bourbon is the red label. We call it our special reserve. It's 110 proof or 55% alcohol volume. That'll be the last bourbon. And then the first rye will be the 94 proof rye. The second rye will be the single barrel rye, which is 104 proof. And then the very last one will be the cask strength 9 year old rye, which is 113 proof. I know that's a lot, so but hey, I'm here for a good time, not a long time. So let's enjoy it. So we'll start with the Alabama style. So it is my grandfather's original recipe. So while a majority of what my grandfather sold in his life was unaged white lightning moonshine, he was unique in a lot of ways versus other moonshiners in the area. And one of those ways was he actually took the time to age a lot of his moonshine into whiskey, which I know you're thinking like, oh yeah, he was experimenting. Well, when you do that, you're sitting on 53 gallons of evidence. So it's pretty risky to even do that. And he would do it one barrel at a time. I will say he did not have the good fortune of aging it for as long as we do today. He was lucky if he could age it for a year. And for that reason, the first time he aged it, he tasted it, hated it. He said, this isn't my standard. This isn't my quality. So he actually dumped it out, didn't give it to anybody, didn't sell it to anybody because he was a firm believer that your reputation is attached to every batch of whiskey you sell. So he started experimenting with different finishes to try to soften the whiskey, but not necessarily flavor the whiskey, just something that would eliminate some of that young, harsh burn that he was getting because the barrel, quite frankly, didn't have enough time to really do its job. So he discovered through a trial and error process that adding oven dried apple slices to the barrel at the very end of the aging process, not for flavor. I want to stress that. A lot of times, especially if you've never had this before, I tell you about the hints of apple, and then you immediately like, oh yeah, I get it on the nose and on the, I'm getting it a little bit on the back end. 99% of people that don't know that this product is finished with the hints of apple never even pick up on it. And that's by design. It's not for flavor, it's for finish. But today we use natural apple extract. This is actually a straight bourbon. Everything about it is legally a straight bourbon. But then once we add that hint of apple, we can no longer call it a bourbon. So it is what we refer to as an Alabama style whiskey. And that is a unique term and phrase to us. So without further ado, please, I'm going to shut up for a second. I'm running my mouth too much and let you drink and gather your thoughts and see what you think. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because that's there we go. Now I can see everyone.
I really like it. It's soft, like you said. A lot of bourbons grab you a little too much, and
Right.
this is surprisingly soft for a bourbon.
Yeah, the purpose of it, we want you to be able to taste those bourbon qualities, the everything you would any flavor profile you're picking up other than the hints of apple, it's just the natural flavor you're getting from the barrel. But in I'm biased. I really am. I'm the grandson of Clyde May. I'm actually Lewis Clyde May the second. But this is one of my favorites. I think it's unique. I think it's smooth. I know it's sacrilege to some to say, but it's also very mixable. I'm of the opinion if you bought the bottle, you drink it however you enjoy it, and if it's Clyde Mays in your glass, I'm sure certainly not going to complain about it. But I think it's a very solid, easy sipping whiskey, no doubt.
It's not too sweet either, which I don't mind a sweet bourbon, but I know a lot of my more Scotch inclined friends are kind of turned off by that. So this
Right.
is a very nice sort of introduction.
Oh yeah, I mean, most of the time, like if I'm doing a tasting in say a store, most of the time I actually try to encourage the consumer to try the whiskey before I tell them what Alabama style means because I don't want to plant it in their head. It's we we're creatures of habit and we tend to listen and plant what we hear other people say. But I figured that the group we have tonight would be able to set that aside and be able to. Not saying you're not supposed to get a hint of apple or anything like that, but I figured you would be able to give your true and honest opinion and not let that influence you too much. Were there any other questions or anything? Like I said, I don't want to move along at too quick a pace or anything like that. So I'm happy to answer anything you have in between, and then we can just slowly go. But if I'm going too fast at any point from the tasting, don't feel like you have to rush. We're here to have a good time and talk and listen to the story of Clyde and enjoy some good whiskey. But we will. The next one would be the 92 proof straight bourbon. So I should say that a lot of people who are familiar with Clyde Mays, I hear it all the time. They say, "Oh yeah, that's that one that's finished with a hint of apple." That's true for our Alabama style whiskey. Any product of ours that says Alabama style, it means it's finished with a hint of apple. If it's not Alabama style, then there's no hint of apple and it just is what it says it is. The only Alabama style you're tasting tonight is the one you tasted first. Everything else is either a bourbon or a rye. So this next one is the first bourbon. It's 92 proof, which I like because it's not really too high proof, but it's not really too low proof either. It's kind of that middle ground, a great everyday sipping straight bourbon. So whenever you guys are ready, guys and gals, feel free to take a taste and let me know what you think.
Did you talk about the mash bill on this bourbon?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. I should have covered that already. So let me backtrack a little bit. The Alabama style is the one you had first is 75% corn, 21% rye, and 4% malted barley. So the straight bourbon you're drinking as we speak is a higher corn content. It's 81% corn and it's actually kind of a weird mash bill. It's kind of a blend of other mash bills, but it's 81% corn, 15 0.75% rye, and 3.25% malted barley. So got a little bit of a higher corn content, a little bit higher proof than the first one you had, but they are the same age. They're both aged for 4 to 5 years.
That is a ton of corn and a very precisely small measurement of malt. I bet you Jordan had something to do with this.
We like to play around a little bit, see what we can come across and like. And I got to give credit on this one to fine gentleman at MGP named Sam Smeltzer. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but he played a huge role in helping create this particular uh, final product that we launched this. So we when we launched as a company for many years, the only whiskey or product we had was the Alabama style. That was it. Just that was the only SKU we had. And then we slowly started introducing other products. And this bourbon that you're tasting now was one of the first additions to the new additions, I should say, to the portfolio. It was really kind of dipping more into that bourbon world and focusing just on a high quality product, which is of course my grandfather. The hint of apple is something he was big on, as well as other things. But as you heard me mention earlier, if it wasn't his standard of excellence, he didn't sell it to you. So we strive to create a the same standard of excellence in every product we make, regardless of the mash bill, the age, the proof, uh, the char of the barrel, anything like that. We just want you to uh, drink and consume and enjoy. We know everybody has a different palate and profile, which is why we have so many different available options because we try to find at least one thing you can really like. And trust me, there's no wrong answer as long as you like one of them. So
Yeah, as Kate said in the chat, this is such an easy drinker. There's just like such a long finish of just different spices,
yep,
but nice and sweet and easy up front.
yeah, it's a good one for sure. It's definitely one. This is, I would say, and I don't know if everybody's kind of. I know a lot of you are in California, Los Angeles area. I think there's maybe a few of you that are not in that area, but outside of Alabama, this particular product is going to be the most popular, the one you're probably going to see most often when you go to your local store or bar or restaurant. The 92 proof straight bourbon is one of our best sellers across the country. But with that, like I said, everybody, take your time. Definitely don't want to rush anyone. But I believe number three is our Conecuh Ridge straight bourbon. So it's a Clyde made product, and you can feel free to start tasting. But I'm going to give a little backstory here, a little bit deeper dive into the brand. I can actually use visuals. So when my
Just
uncle,
just just before we get going, I want to make
please.
sure this is 102 proof.
100.3 proof. The 102 proof is going to be number four that we taste. So the one
Okay,
that we're tasting now is the one that, and excuse me, it's 100.6 proof. It's
100.6.
55.3 alcohol volume.
Okay,
Or
so this
excuse
is
me,
the
quantity.
five. This is a 5-year bourbon.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it's
Okay, got
5 years.
it. Thanks.
No problem. So when Kenny May, my uncle, started the brand, it was originally known as Clyde May's Conecuh Ridge whiskey. So the Alabama style that you tasted first, this is what it looked like back in those days. This was batch number one, what it looked like in the early 2000s. Obviously, we've revamped our packaging, and over the course of time, we wanted the focus to be more on Clyde May. So we flipped, and the name of the product is Clyde May's Whiskey, but the name of our new distillery is Conecuh Ridge Distillery. So the one that you're tasting right now, Clyde May's Conecuh Ridge Bourbon, is sort of a tribute to the original name of the product when it was introduced, but it's also sort of a tribute to our soon to be open Conecuh Ridge Distillery in Troy, Alabama. And as I mentioned earlier, this is aged for 5 years. It's 100.6 proof, and it's same mash bill as the Alabama style. It's that 75 corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley. The difference is being age, proof. There's no hints of apple. This is a straight bourbon, and this is also a small batch, so it's a smaller number of barrels used in the overall batch of the product.
I'm guessing when you start serving food, it's going to be Conecuh Ridge sausage sandwiches.
Yeah, so you or did I hear you say you're in Pensacola? Is that what I
I,
heard earlier?
I
Yeah, so
live in Navarre, but yeah,
yeah, no, I know Navarre too. You're a hop, skip, and a jump away from the distillery. You better come up and come visit us. I'll
I'll
give
do
you
it.
a tour, yeah, for sure. But yes, we will. For those that are not familiar, in the state of Alabama and across the southeast, there is a very popular sausage that's made called Conecuh sausage. Locals are the number one question I get from local Alabamians when they hear Conecuh Ridge Distillery is they say, "Oh, you must be based in Conecuh County, because that is a county in Alabama, and that's where Conecuh sausage is made." However, that's not the case. We are in Pike and Bullock County. The reason we say Conecuh Ridge is because the creeks and the water source that my grandfather used to make his moonshine, those creeks form the headwaters of the Conecuh River. So the area where I grew up was known as the Conecuh Ridge. But yes, we will probably be serving up some Conecuh sausage, no doubt.
Thank you.
No problem.
Tony, be careful with the hops and the skips and the jumps.
Yeah.
We have a member who went skipping after a whiskey event and then had to walk on crutches for 3 months.
Well,
Those of us who whiskey tend to not
yeah. Listen,
be careful.
I'll say this: when you sell whiskey for a living, don't take everything that comes out of my mouth too literal. So like earlier, I said I'm here for a good time, not a long time. Well, I do hope I'm around a long time. That's just a phrase. So, and same to you, Tony. Don't hop, skip, and jump. Just get in the car and drive safely to us. And if you enjoy yourself after the tour, if you want to do some skipping, we'll find a nice safe spot for you to do it on site.
Okay, yeah, I'll be sure to drive up there though.
We're well aware of the sincerity of Southerners. Bless your
yeah, so
heart.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a question. All right.
Yes, please.
Are all of these going to be as smooth as these first three? I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah,
They're so gentle. They're almost like Irish whiskeys in that regard.
I would say, we're going to continue to climb up in proof. I will say this for sure, that when we produce any products, one of our number one goals is we want someone to drink it, and whatever the proof or the alcohol volume is, we want you to say, that doesn't drink like an 85 proof or a 92 proof or a 110 proof. So I do, which, honestly, like I said earlier, I am biased, but as we continue to go up in proof, I will say that I think that they drink much smoother than what the proof says on the bottle, but they probably will start to get a little bit warmer as we get up in proof. And then, of course, when we get to the rye whiskey, I know for a lot of people, rye whiskey is sort of a love-hate relationship, but I think, and I'll talk more to some of our rye when we get there, but I do think we have some phenomenal rye products as well. But in the spirit of that, one thing I will say is the next one that we're going to try, which is a single barrel. This is a single barrel that we did. I'm not sure entirely who picked this specific barrel that you're going to be tasting, but that's one thing I can attest to. You know, when you sell single barrels, barrels have different profiles from barrel to barrel, but I'm sure this one is a very nice one. It's 5 years old and it's 102 proof. So very slightly higher than the Conecuh Ridge, but the key difference being that Conecuh Ridge is a small batch and the one you're tasting now is a single barrel. It should look, which I know you got little sample bottles, but this is what it would look like if you saw it on the shelf in the store. So 5 years old, single barrel, 102 proof. And my good friend Bill Nolan, who's on the call, I don't know if he's going to be able to answer, but he may be able to say who picked this specific barrel. I'm not sure, but you'll have to let me know if you like it. So I haven't found one I hated yet, so you can let me know.
What is the mash bill for these last two that we've just had?
Yeah,
Because
the last two were actually the same
different.
mash bill.
Really?
It's 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley. Now we do our very best to. Obviously, there are differences in the proof and maybe it's single barrel or small batch, but we also try to use different barrels from different rick houses and things like that when we're making these products. That way, we're trying to get a a truly unique flavor in every bottle because as I'm sure all of you are aware, you know, the mash bill is only one small piece of the final flavor profile of the bourbon. You know, it's how long you age it, how often you rotate it, what kind of char you got in the barrel, and a lot of your yeast strain, your water source, all this fun stuff can lead to the final product. And I can say from experience, you know, when I've helped people pick single barrels over the years, you know, we'll have two single barrels that were laid down on the exact same day and they aged right next to one another, but they taste completely different. That's sort of the beauty and mystique of bourbon. It's just you never know what you're going to get, really.
Is this the same mash bill as the Alabama?
Yeah, so the next few you're going to try, well, actually only one more after this one, but the Alabama style, the Conecuh Ridge, the single barrel, and the special reserve, which is the next one, the 110 proof, they're all the same mash bill. But like I said, they're different in age, proof, batch size, and also, you know, the where we pulled the specific barrels. So that's actually a good lead in into the next one. We call this next one our special reserve because it comes from a select stock of barrels that we chose specifically to be put into this specific product. It's also a small batch. It's aged a little bit longer than the others. It's aged for 6 years instead of 4 or 5. And it is the highest proof amongst the bourbons that we will drink tonight. It's 110 proof.
It's really got a nice color. The color on this is very nice. Yeah.
And for all of our products, including the most of the rye whiskeys, we use Char 4 barrels. So when I first got into the industry, you know, Char 4 used to be considered really the highest char. You know, it was known as alligator char because you char the barrel so much it looks like alligator skin. But I know some brands around the country are starting to experiment with what they're calling, you know, char 5 and char 6. So I guess you can't really call char 4 the highest char anymore. Maybe it's the highest char that's used most often. Maybe you can say that, but we do feel like the more you char the barrel, the more natural flavor you're getting out of the walls and the staves of the barrel. So what are we thinking so far? So we've gone through the Alabama style whiskey and the bourbon. So before we get in the rye, I know there was a comment that single barrel was Bethany's favorite so far. What's everybody else's favorite so far? Remember, there's no wrong answer as long as you like one. That's the beauty of it.
You know, I have to admit, I surprisingly really liked the Alabama style, but I love to pair things with food, and I'm already like writing all the things I could pour this over,
There you go.
especially desserts.
I love it. Love it.
Me also. I love the Alabama so far. That's my favorite. Yep.
Speaking to
We
my
did a
heart.
we did an advent calendar, well, a couple of years ago now for Christmas. I built an advent calendar where we started out with the little tiny, the small size bourbons and then got all the way up to bottles. And it was the first time we had tried, the Clyde May. And I was like, what? What have we been missing out on this whole time? And it was just ever since then, it was just one of our liquors that we had to have in our cabinet. And it's my husband's birthday as of midnight. It was tomorrow actually, but we
All
were
right,
excited
awesome.
about this today.
Well,
And
I'll be able to celebrate before you. I don't know if you're in California on that
we're in
time.
West Palm. We're in Florida.
Okay, yeah. So, well,
Yeah.
happy early birthday to him.
Thank you.
So yeah, so we just kind of stumbled on to Clyde May, and we were thrilled. I just couldn't believe it. It blew me away when we tried it for the first time. So when I saw this was something close to his birthday, I'm like, I just surprised him. He just found out a couple hours ago that we were doing this.
Oh,
So
there you go. That's
thank you. It's wonderful
yeah,
so far.
yeah. Good luck topping that birthday present when it's her birthday. So I don't think you can. Well, we'll do this again around your birthday. We'll do a part two, and we should have some different products we can try. Something new. So whenever your birthday is, that can be part two of the Clyde May discussion. So, well, with that, we can start diving into the rye whiskey. As I mentioned earlier, I know for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, rye whiskey is somewhat of a love-hate relationship, or maybe that's too strong. Maybe it's a like or dislike relationship. But the first one you're going to try, our readily available, sort of our everyday rye whiskey, is 94 proof. And I like to consider it a bourbon drinker's rye whiskey because it doesn't overpower you with a ton of rye spice. But despite that, for the people who do love rye whiskey, it still has a lot of those characteristics you look for in a good rye whiskey. So you'll have to let me know if you agree, and don't feel bad if you disagree. You can call me an idiot, and that's okay. Because like I said, as long as you like one of them, that's all that matters to me. So you'll have to let me know what you think.
So I have a kind of a divergent question here.
Sure.
This is going back to your grandfather, right?
Yeah, yes,
Clyde. Okay,
yes.
so Clyde grew up during the Depression,
Right.
and then he started making his whiskeys, hopefully as an adult, or at least close enough to be an adult.
Close to it. Yeah, he got started young in this part of the world back then.
But he was really particular about what he would sell. He'd pour it out if he didn't think it was perfect.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm, drinking these, they're so smooth. I mean, even the last one, which was like a lot more spicier and bold than the others. Anyway, does he take the heart? Like, does he skinny it down to just the heart? How much of the heads and tails does he leave in there? You know what I mean? So as a depression baby, I would think he'd try to squeeze out the tails and stuff, right?
So the kind of the beauty, and I'll say this, I've heard a lot of master distillers or head distillers. I know different distilleries have different titles for their whiskey makers, but I've heard so many of them talk about the art making whiskey and bourbon. And that is so true. Like I mentioned earlier, there's just so much to it that even maybe the average consumer doesn't realize or appreciate. But I'll take it a step further, and you got to think about the process of what Clyde May and other moonshiners in the area went through. They had to look over their shoulder looking for the law. They had, they didn't have any sort of machines or anything to test the proof. They were just having it was
Sure.
trial and error. It really was. So my grandfather and many other moonshiners too, and then my father continued it for many years. When they would start a fresh run of whiskey for starters, everything he did was always sour mash. He was a firm believer that you have to take used grains from a previous grain bed and add it to your fresh grains. That way it wouldn't be too green, is what they would call it. Too green, it would be like turpentine. But the first liquid or distilled moonshine that would come out of that still was always way too hot, way too, that's
Yeah.
the kind of stuff that could even be potentially dangerous to some degree. Now, some moonshiners, they're in it to make a buck. So, that just like, when other moonshiners, when they'd hear he would dump out that aged barrel he let sit for a year, they're like, you're crazy. Somebody will drink it, because some people drink for the effect, not the flavor. But Clyde was dedicated to his craft. And so it's hard to verbally say. I'm going to have to do my best to paint a picture for you, if you will. For starters, moonshine is often associated with corn whiskey. My grandfather used a good bit of rye in his
Yeah.
mash bill. He believed it was a flavor grain. But after he got out, after a certain amount was distilled, the amount that he thought was too high proof, um, he would lay out five, we called them jugs, but what a jug is, it's a 5 gallon container. And he would lay out 5 jugs. And the first run of what he would consider to be quality moonshine, it would fill up a 1 gallon glass jar, and he would pour that gallon in the first jug. And then the second time the gallon glass jar got full, he would put that in the second jug, and so on and so forth, the third, the fourth, and the fifth. Because a lot of moonshiners, they would just, your first 5 gallons that they made, they would put in the same jug, and then that jug would be 5, 6 times stronger than jug number 5, because as it keeps running, it's going to get
Correct.
weaker, weaker, and weaker. So he was actually doing it that way to get an even balanced proof across the board. And that was one way that helped keep it consistent and smooth when he made it. And I know that's a
Yeah.
very long explanation and probably not all what you were looking for, but
No, it
it
it,
was
it really tells me a lot. But what I was kind of getting at was basically, the juxtaposition of somebody who went through the Great Depression, and all of us who have parents or grandparents who lived through the Great Depression, we know how, I don't know, miserly. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just
oh
mean
no,
that,
I
frugal
totally,
they were,
yeah,
right?
and absolutely, and
And
that was
how,
one thing that made him different, is that
yeah,
what he did was, let's be clear. I mean, he was providing for his family. He
yeah,
definitely was in it to make money, but he also believed, the better you made it, the more money you can make. If you don't cut corners, if you do the little things that make a difference, you're producing a higher quality whiskey. I mean, I'll tell a little story that ties into that. After he died in 1990, my dad was in his early 20s when my grandfather died, and he immediately took over sort of the May family illegal moonshine operation. And other moonshiners in the area, they respected Clyde May. He was their elder, so they would never really approach him and ever say, "Hey, listen, man, you're selling way more than we are. You're taking up all the business, whatever." They would never say that because they respected Clyde. Well, Clyde's dead, and now there's this 22-year-old punk, if you will, that's still taking up all their business because they know he can make it just as good as Clyde May did. So when they approached him and was like, "Hey, Billy, listen, you're taking up all the business. You got to do some market share." My dad's response was simple. He said, "Listen, how much do you sell a gallon of moonshine for?" And at that time, the going rate was $9 to $10 a gallon. It was like, "Oh, we sell $9 or $10 a gallon." And he said, okay, well, on your best week of the whatever your best week of the year is, how many gallons do you sell in that week? And most of them, 75, 80 gallons, whatever it was. And my father said, all right, well, I charge $14 a gallon. And on my best week in a year, I sell 300 gallons. So don't you think if yours was better than mine, they would,
Yeah.
go to you because you're cheaper? You're already undercutting me, price wise, but they're coming to me because, it's about the quality of the product. So,
Yeah.
and that's something Clyde
Well,
May stood on. It's he
well,
would.
the other part of that is the longevity is not just that it was, I mean, it is that it was a great product, but I guess getting into the longevity, right? He could have been shut down many times, no doubt, by the local authorities,
Oh, he was.
right?
I mean,
But
moonshining.
and he was okay, fine, but consider that it was good, right?
Right.
So if the sheriff drank, the sheriff would probably steer the authorities to a different moonshiner to go shut them down than to shut down Clyde, right? So I feel like it speaks to the longevity, the quality that he put out speaks to the longevity through all the ups and downs and the legality and the illegality
Oh,
of
for
it.
sure. And just so you know, he did have plenty of local sheriffs that were customers of his. This is, definitely, not everybody followed the book or the letter of the law, I should say. But definitely, Clyde May. Listen, he got arrested one time. He served an 8-month prison sentence for that one arrest. But uh, at this time, especially in rural Southeast Alabama, there was somewhat of a mutual respect between local law enforcement and the moonshiners.
Yeah.
Local law enforcement said, "Hey, these guys are not out, selling fentanyl. They're just trying to, they're making a quality product and trying to provide for their families." And on the other hand, moonshiners said, "Hey, listen, these local law enforcement entities, they have a job to do too. It's technically their job to bust us. We know we're doing something illegal." So most of the time, if a moonshine still, someone found it and turned it in or whatever, usually the local law enforcement would just go and destroy it. And they wouldn't try to hide in the bushes and wait for the moonshiner to, stumble down there. They would just destroy it. And then that was your punishment. Now you're in the hole, however much money you had put into that specific still and everything else that comes with it. So Clyde, he got arrested one time, but he probably had, 20 plus moonshine stills destroyed in a roughly 44 year period. So he definitely, but he always went right back to it. He always just rebuilt and set it up somewhere else and kept it rolling.
Right.
So,
and on the other hand, if he was selling dangerous whiskey, right? Because there's a reason for the term blind drunk, right?
Right. Yeah.
If he was selling dangerous whiskey, they probably would have, put him in jail.
Oh yeah, no
lot
question.
longer.
I mean,
So
I give a lot of credit. Clyde May made rightfully so. I mean, he made a quality product, but I have to give credit where credit's due to the other moonshiners in the area. They were making a great moonshine too. Now, maybe it wasn't to quite the standard of Clyde May. Maybe they, didn't take as much time as Clyde May did to do certain things, but the moonshiners where I grew up, because moonshining was still prevalent. Like I said, my dad was making it. I knew lots of moonshiners. The ones that don't make it anymore, I'll talk about. The ones that are still making it, I won't, because Daddy didn't raise no snitch. But it's definitely around these parts, quality whiskey was always being made, no doubt.
good, yeah.
But and I hope you enjoy the 94 proof rye whiskey. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned it's a very high rye mash bill. It's 95% rye, 5% malted barley on that mash bill. So that tends to surprise some people because I really don't think it packs the amount of spice you would expect on one that's got a 95.5 mash bill. And the next to last one we're trying is a single barrel straight rye whiskey. It's same mash bill. but it's 104 proof. It's a little bit older. It's 5 years, and then obviously, as I mentioned before, it's a single barrel, so there are going to be different characteristics barrel to barrel. But you know, from I like I said, I haven't found a single barrel rye I've hated yet. So you'll have to let me know what you think of this one for sure.
I like
Absolutely.
cherry cough syrup on the nose. It's interesting. It's got like a mintiness.
Oh, that.
I will say in the single barrel ryes that I've either been involved in picking or the ones I tasted after a certain person or account picked it, I do think mint is a very stronger common note in these single barrels, which I know mint, that's kind of a, in a way an oxymoron because mint's a pretty common note in rye whiskeys, but I think these have a good note of mint up front. Usually, like I said, with it being a single barrel, it could have been an anomaly. So,
I had a question. So, what was the turning point to make your grandfather successful after all of his endeavors to his
yeah, well,
gallons of,
I
it
mean,
turning into a
you mean
business?
like successful, like during his when he was alive,
Yeah.
kind of
So, was it
deal?
your uncle coming into the business
Well,
or?
so like I said, my grandfather died in 1990. He
Mhm.
never dreamed or aspired. I know, and this is, I'm not saying this to be derogatory or slouch anyone who's, been a part of this, to each their own. But, he grew up in a time and a place where doing it legally was not something that he ever thought of doing. He didn't think that was possible. I know in today's world, you watch the show Moonshiners, and they do
Yep.
it illegally on TV for 20 minutes, and they have a legal brand the next week. That was
Yep.
never Clyde's goal ever. So, in fact, I tell people all the time, and I mean this from the very bottom of my heart. This is one thing I can say with 100% certainty. If Clyde May were alive today, he would still be doing it illegally today. We would not be on this
Perfect.
call because,
Great.
he was not, he didn't like his name in the spotlight. He just let his product do the talking for him. He would not have wanted the attention. He would have been very appreciative, I'm sure, and grateful for any compliments and, the people who enjoy it nationwide and worldwide. But he was a simple man, and he just, you know, provided for his family and did what he had to do. But I would say the turning point to answer your question, I mean, I don't know that there was a specific time or place where it just sort of clicked. I just think over the course of those first 4 or 5 years, there was a bit of a learning curve. I mean, he knew how to make moonshine because when he was a teenager growing up, he would assist and help other moonshiners in the area. But when he started doing it himself, he wanted to try things. He wanted to experiment with things. And I think it was probably maybe close to 9 or 10 years into it is when he started to hit his stride and, got known for certain things. And then from there, it just kept going and going and going. And then got arrested in 1972 and got sentenced in 1973 and did his time in federal prison on an Air Force base in Montgomery, Alabama, and then got out and went right back to it. Didn't deter him. So,
Great.
and last but certainly not least, I'm going to come out of the gate and tell you right now, the last one we're trying is definitely going to be the most unique profile of all of the ones we've tasted. This is a 91% rye, 9% malted barley, so slightly different mash bill. It's bottled at cask strength, so it's not cut with water, and it comes out of the barrel at 113 proof. It's aged for 9 years. And this particular rye has a very, in my opinion, like I said, everybody has their own thoughts and opinions, and that's the beauty of this business is there's no wrong answers when it comes to that. But it's very earthy, very herbal. It's that kind of rye whiskey. You get those kind of those earth tones to it. But I'll let you try and see what you think.
For a 9-year whiskey, I'm surprised at the lack of
It
color.
is a lighter whiskey, yes, it is.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is actually one that does not come from MGP. This was a unique project. This, just so you know, too, this particular product you're tasting was a one and done for us, and it was done by design. With us contract distilling and sourcing barrels and products, we're always looking for something different and unique. And we came across this particular set of barrels that we really liked, just because of how unique it is. And this is actually a Canadian rye whiskey, though, so it's not MGP.
Interesting.
So that is part of why you have the different color profile on that particular product.
So where was it aged?
It was aged in Canada. It was
In
distilled
Canada.
in Canada. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That kind of explains the color a little bit.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Unique.
Who was it? Who was it that was talking about pairing earlier?
I believe that was Lizzie. Was that you, Lizzie? Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of in my head been doing the same. I feel like each of these would pair well with something, you know? We got to be doing, dinners like that where we pair the whiskeys with stuff. But there's a lot of umami, in this one, in this last one. It's so different from all the others, like you said.
And, that's one of my favorite things about doing, getting the opportunity to introduce these different products to people. Because I'll tell you, I'm just like Claude May, I'm a simple man. When I pair my whiskey with an empty glass is what I pair it with.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I've had people come up to me and ask my opinion. Oh, what would you pair this with? When I'm drinking Claude Mays, I might drink it with a steak or a bag of Doritos. I don't know, but it's just so I leave it up to the experts to
Yeah.
get on the food pairing side of it. But I would
But
definitely take your word for it.
but I almost feel like this one, it's so different and it's got that funk. It almost needs to be paired with food. It's like asking to be
I
paired with
agree.
food.
I agree.
The others, you could drink them straight up or you could pair them with food. But I feel like this one kind of needs to be paired with something. I just don't know what because I'm not one of those people. I wish I were.
Well, in the chat here, we have an offer from. So just so you know, I should have introduced him before I started speaking. One of the key facilitators to this meeting tonight, Mr. Bill Nolan. He's one of he's the VP of pretty much the Western United States. He's based in California, and he has put in the chat that he is more than happy to help facilitate some sort of bourbon dinner on the West Coast. So if you guys want to get together and do that, I know he'll be happy to facilitate. And depending on where you do it or how you do it, I'd be happy to zoom in and join as well. And but Bill would be which I have a face for radio anyway. It would probably be better if I cut the camera off, but Bill's a more handsome guy. You probably have more fun with him anyway. He's got that nice, California golden boy look. So, which his camera is off right now. He's not showing himself. So,
Bill, you got to turn
Bill,
your camera on after that intro.
They're gonna think that I'm a liar if you turn your camera on, probably. But but no, a big kudos to Bill for sure for helping facilitate this. He does a lot of great things for us. So he says he's talking me up way too much. Maybe I am. I don't know. So it's I don't think so. But
so I have another question, and
sure.
This is because you're moving into your own distillery now,
right?
So a lot of this is MGP,
mm-hmm.
right? That's what you said.
Pretty much all of it is, except the last one.
Except for the last one. So how confident are you that you're going to be able to reproduce these flavors in your own stills?
I'm our goal, and I tell people this all the time. Our goal is not necessarily we're not after the flavor, we're after the quality. So, there might be a slight flavor change because realistically you're going from Indiana to Southeast Alabama.
Right.
So there's probably most likely, and also too, we are going to tweak the mash bills to something that we feel might be better suited for us. We're going to experiment with new mash bills, come out with new products. That's the beauty of having
Yeah.
your own place. But while there's a lot I can say about my grandfather, as biased as I may be, I can tell you that the number one thing we will always focus on is the quality. We don't want to shell shock anybody. We don't want someone to pick up a product that they've enjoyed all these years and all of a sudden like, this just tastes completely different. I hate it. We don't want that experience for you. We are going to do everything in our power to follow the creed of Clyde, and that's to produce a quality whiskey. But more than likely, there will be some sort of overall profile difference. I'm hopeful. I'm very proud of all of these products. I'm very proud of the flavor
Yeah.
profile, and I'm very hopeful that we can get it very close. But most of all, we just want to make sure it's something out there that we can be proud of, and that my grandfather Clyde would be proud of. And I'll
So
also go ahead, please.
I was just going to ask, are all of these aged in, well, except for the last one, in
Right.
Indiana, or are they
Correct,
aged?
yes.
So
Everything's done in
even
Indiana,
just the location of aging them
correct.
in Alabama, Southeast Alabama. I mean,
Right.
come on, you're going to have just the influence of the location
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
the barrels. It feels like you should ease everybody into it by taking some of the
Right.
barrels out of Indiana, putting them in Alabama,
That
Indiana
is
to
actually
Alabama
planned.
for a little
So
while.
when
Yeah.
we open our distillery, we will immediately begin bottling in Troy, Alabama. So that's phase one. Will be bottled in Troy, and we are going to take some of our younger barrels that have aged for maybe half their life in Indiana, and we're going to let them finish aging in Alabama. So there will be sort of a transitional
In
process
transition,
where
yeah.
it'll be aged and bottled in Alabama, and then sometime after that, it'll be distilled, aged, and bottled in Alabama. That's the plan right now. But you're absolutely right. We are going to sort of ease people into that transition period with by letting some of our younger MGP barrels finish aging in Alabama. In fact, we already have a few barrels down at the distillery that are
Good.
getting ready to be bottled. So we're ramping this up, getting ready. We're very excited about that. Trust me, as the
Yeah.
official state spirit of Alabama, I would have loved nothing more when my uncle Kenny May, who I will admit, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, he sadly passed away in 2017. But when he started this brand, he tried very hard he went to the state of Alabama. He got a lobbyist, he got lawyers, he did everything he could in his power to build the first legal distillery in the state of Alabama. And at the time, they told him, no, we're not doing it. Sorry. So we went a different route. And while I would have loved to have been in Alabama all this time, it would have been great. If we would have built a distillery in 2001, it probably could have fit in this bedroom I'm sitting in right now. It would have been nothing of the sort of what we're about to open. So while most brands build the distillery and then they grow the brand, we've kind of done it a little backwards. We grew the brand, we grew the name, we grew the story, and now we're finally able to bring it home. And it's going to be just like something you'd experience in Kentucky and other great distilleries across the country. And it's going to be something that everyone can be proud of, and we're very excited about that. And I will use that to lead in and say, and by the way, I'm happy to answer any more questions you may have. But I just want to take a moment to thank all of you again. I hope you enjoyed the product. I hope you enjoyed the night. I hope you learned something. I hope you become a diehard fan of Clyde May. But just understand this, that I do this job for my grandfather. Everything I do, the reason I get out of bed every morning is to tell his story and to continue his legacy, because I think it's something that's worth continuing. He lived a hard life, but he lived a life and a story that's worth telling, in my opinion. And anyone, I don't care if it's one person or 1,000 people, anyone who will take time out of their day, their evening, their afternoon to listen to me and my, Southern accent ramble on about Clyde May, it means the world to me. So you actually, probably did more for me tonight than I did for you. So I want to thank all of you for the time. This doesn't stop here. I don't do this to pump you up for 5 minutes. If there's ever anything I can do for any one of you, feel free to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat. That way you can have it. If you ever have any questions or want to reach out with anything, that's what I'm here for. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for the time tonight. It's been wonderful.
I really appreciate your introduction to me for me of Clyde May, because I saw it on the shelves, but I never decided to buy it because I just didn't know what it was. So I really
Well, that's
appreciate
why
this.
we do
This is
these
great.
things.
Yeah.
The bourbon world is a cluttered world right now. There's no question about it. But we stand by our product, and I'm always going to stand by Clyde May. It's if it's the last thing I do, Clyde May is going to be a big name in this industry because he deserves to be, for sure. So we're definitely going to continue to grow it, and we need ambassadors on the road. We need in all parts of the country, and I hope we gained a few tonight. I hope, for sure. But I greatly appreciate everything you guys did for me, and I hope you enjoyed them all.
Well, I'll definitely be adding the Alabama style to my unique and different tasting.
And there you go.
I
There you
like
go.
it.
That's what I like to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that one was definitely yeah, like I'll be cooking with that one and drinking that one
There
while
you
I'm
go.
cooking.
I think I like that one the best.
As long as it's Clyde, my approval's there. So
I think I like that the best because I felt like it was honestly most unique from other bourbons that I've had, So I, I'm thrilled with that one. Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you very
So
much.
I've just learned something about Alabama bourbon.
There you go. Yeah.
And one Total Wine store in Austin, Texas has it. So
okay, well there you go. Well, Bill actually he calls on Total Wine not only in California, but he deals with Total Wine corporately. So if there's ever any assistance we can provide there, not just with Total Wine, but we're also available at several other private retailers and other chains and things like that as well, for sure, that we're more than happy to assist. And Bill turned on his camera, so when he turned on his camera earlier, I think he changed. He put on his, Mr. Rogers sweater, and he came on and decided to comb his hair and look good for everybody. I hyped him up too much. So
as far as late, is it the regular Alabama you guys had or the Alabama 110?
So there is, yes. So there is an Alabama style. The 110 that we had tonight is a straight bourbon. It's not Alabama style. But to answer, I have one right here. This is a product that we've had in the past. It's an Alabama style version of the Special Reserve. It's got that hints of apple to it. You may still be able to find it in some stores or shelves in California, but to be quite honest, we don't produce this as we speak right now because we ran out of specific barrels for this product. I think we may reintroduce it down the road, but this is what the bottle looks like. It's sort of a cream color, if you will. But
I would have that on my shelf on a regular basis. That was one of my favorite products.
Yeah. So Bill may be able to help you track one down. I'm sure there's one around somewhere in your neck of the woods for sure. So, and I don't mean to keep throwing everything on Bill. Bill, I hope I hope your mouth can cash the checks I'm writing for you here, because I'm definitely throwing them at you here. So look at Bill, he's got a bottle in his garage. So just go to Bill's garage and he'll take care of you. So.
Well, thank you again for surprising people that go to Bourbon Festival and have a huge array of bourbon on their shelf. So I appreciate everything you
Yeah.
do because it's a different flavor. It's a completely different
Well,
flavor profile, and we drink Clive May a lot, actually.
I greatly appreciate
Yeah.
that, Heidi, and to all of you. If you ever find yourself in Alabama for some reason, come and see us. Troy
Except
is
for
located.
football, because we're
Yeah, there you
UF
go. Well,
people.
listen,
So.
Troy, if you ever want to go to the Florida Panhandle and go and visit Tony or the Florida beaches, if you're start in Alabama or north of Alabama, you have to go through Troy. So maybe we can all get together and see the distillery and then go to Tony's
Fantastic.
house. So
Fantastic. Thank you so
yeah,
much for sharing and for being you and being able to relate to the product. I really appreciate it.
yeah, no, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate that.
So we have one little tradition before we head out. So everybody voted on the poll for their favorite, and I'll share the results in a second. But we do have a tradition here for I want to ask everyone to turn on the cameras for just a second, and we want to raise a glass to Clyde Mays, to LC, to everyone here. Thank you very much for joining us. Happy birthday, Aaron. And we're happy to have you. Cheers to you. I'm dragging my feet, so I'll see. There we go.
Yeah,
Cheers to you.
sorry. Yeah,
Thanks for being here
my
tonight.
glass was empty. I'm not going to cheers with an empty glass
I
now.
respect that.
That's not it. So.
Raise your glass and smile to the camera. One sec. Got it. Perfect. Hmm, that came out great. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. If you have any more questions, we can do them offline, but I'm going to stop the recording and then we're going to run out a raffle so nobody walk away because Bill hooked us up. And yeah, then we just hang out. So one second. So thank you all for coming.